In this episode, we're talking about teamwork, leadership, and all the things that we want to happen. Well, how does learning and development play a role in that? Coming up on The Perfect Route. Dr. Bill Sodeman here with you again, and I've got Keith Meyerson on the show today. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Bill. How you doing?
Doing great. You've got such an interesting background. I thought the listeners and viewers would enjoy hearing from you. Just a few of the things you're interested in and some of the highlights.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a current doctoral student in leadership, so I have my master's in organizational leadership, and I've always been interested in how we as business partners can help the business succeed. And I think learning and development sits at the perfect intersection in the business because as we go through discovery, we work with everyone. We're the ones that are chasing the cats and connecting all the dots. So I've always been interested in being in the know, and I think learning and development, talent management really helps achieve that.
Yeah, we're crucial. We're strategic, and that gets lost in translation, especially when the markets um are weird. You know, there's this tendency to see learning and development as a cost center rather than as an investment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
I've had conversations with CEOs where they tell me we're too busy to talk about learning because we're focused on the numbers. And my response has been, how do you expect those numbers to change? And that's when the light bulb goes off. I mean, you're only going to get success through your people. So if you're not focused on people development, you're not focused on outcomes.
yeah, yeah, and that's a big one. You've any business that's got audacious goals, you and I don't see any way to reach those without learning.
And understanding how learning fits into the big picture. I mean, it's been my experience that most executives, I had a CHRO call it sheep dipping. There's a problem in the organization. Let's just send people to training like that's the magic pill. And they don't take the time to understand if training is even the right intervention. I mean, typically we're part of a holistic intervention, but we're not isolated as the only intervention that's going to have success. We have to work within the business and with everything else. So I spend a lot of my time educating leaders on root cause analysis and separating symptoms from problems so that they're focused on the right solutions that are sustainable, impactful, and measurable.
Yeah, yeah, the sheep dipping response that is just for me, I don't find it frustrating. It's just like missed opportunities
Yeah.
because training ain't teaching. And even when you're teaching somebody, that doesn't mean that they're going to walk out of the classroom or the online session or whatever and be able to do whatever skill or capability you're trying to do right away. It'll be on their mind for a few moments, but then what's next?
Well, there's so much that goes into that, right? What are we trying to solve for? How are we measuring success? How are we including business leaders in support? So when they do go back, it's not just another, well, you were trained, you should know how to do this. It's actually built into the workflow. It's part of the performance management. They're being held accountable. But we're demonstrating
Yeah.
proficiency,
Yeah.
not compliance.
So one of the things that we're definitely interested in is the business not understanding the value of learning.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is on us as practitioners. We haven't done
Yeah.
a really solid job of earning the seat at the table that everyone's claiming they want because we continue to rely on vanity metrics. We're pushing our value as cheeks and seats or testing percentages rather than aligning with the the words of the business. What are the metrics they're looking for? Did we solve the problem? Was the training even designed to solve the problem? Or was it
Yeah.
part of a more holistic solution that's needed that includes training, but also includes other areas of the business?
Okay. Yeah. certainly the vanity metrics don't help the impression that learning and development either is inconsistent in delivering ROI or doesn't even care about whether delivering ROI.
Yeah. And again, I think that the business isn't holding us accountable to that in most places, and we're not holding ourselves accountable. And
Mhm.
most learning leaders that I've met struggle with how to isolate their impact and, running A/B testing, running pilots, things of that nature, isolating your impact on a pilot group is extremely important. And sometimes organizations don't allow us to do that. They want to, spray and pray. No, we
Right.
need to, roll this out to the entire enterprise without even testing its efficacy. So I think there's enough blame to go around on why this happens, but I think it's incumbent upon us as learning leaders to make that transition and educate our peers in the business.
Definitely. Spray and pray just doesn't, you may as well just rely on luck at that point. Having a good pilot is always a good approach because if nothing else, it helps you not only refine the content and delivery, but it does help you pinpoint metrics that make a difference in the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where the discussion should start. What
Yeah.
are you trying to achieve and why? And how do
Mhm.
we measure success? And then the program is built back from there. I mean, I've had, one example when I was with a financial institution, the chief revenue officer came to me and said, we need a sales training program. And I looked at him dumbfounded and I said, why? He said, well, we don't have one. And I said, okay, do you have salespeople? Yes. Are they selling? Yes. I'm like, okay, tell me again why we need a sales training program. Well, I think they can sell more. Okay, what does more mean? Oh, they're selling $29,000 worth of product 30 days out of training. I think they could do better. I'm like, you're killing me, man. What's better mean? Well, if you could double that, I'd be happy. Okay, so what you're asking me is not a sales training program. You're asking me to help your new hires sell $60,000 worth of product 30 days out of training, right? A true SMART goal. He's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's exactly what I want. Great. Well, I'm not just creating a sales training program because I have to talk to recruiting and compensation and legal and IT and all of the variables that go into making a new hire successful. So we worked with our business partners. We created all of that, and they ended up getting $129,000 of sales from new hires 30 days out of training. And
Nice.
that positioned us in the business as credible business partners, not learning leaders or training people, right? We're here to help you succeed. And a lot of that is extremely consultative. We have to take the time to help them figure out what they really want.
Yeah. And, that's a really good point. And I run into this with coaching myself. Um, just because they're, you know, uh, our potential partner is using the words, it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what it means. They don't know what they're asking for sometimes.
They and a lot of times it's feeling, it's not data. I mean, I
Right.
started teaching this root cause workshop to executives because when I was running L&D for a high-end luxury retailer, the CHRO came to me one day and said, "Hey, our customer sat scores are really low." And I said, "Well, what's your lowest performing category?" And she said, "Friendliness." And she paused and she said, "Hey, can you create a training program to help improve our scores in friendliness?" And I looked at her deadpan and I said, all right, let me understand the ask here. You want me to train grown adults how to be nice to one another? And she looked at me, she's like, and I'll edit what she said, but it was basically, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I went, okay, can I ask you some questions? How do you define friendliness? She's like, what do you mean? Everyone knows what friendliness is. I'm like, no, what are the behaviors that we're going to measure?
Yeah.
And if you haven't defined those, how are you hiring friendly people? So now you're putting us against the eight ball because now you want us to train people that might not be friendly. And oh, by the way, you have 100% commission. So you're pitting individuals against one another. There's no teamwork because
Mhm.
it's all commission. So you're you're not creating an environment that is friendly. She's like, wow, this is a bigger problem than just training. And I just started laughing. I'm like, exactly. But
Mhm.
by asking those questions, I helped her come to the realization herself rather than me just, screaming, training isn't the answer. You have to help them get there.
Yeah. And often we run into folks who they seize upon training as an easy out, or an easy path. And we we understand, and you've put it so eloquently, that it's part of a network of learning and support.
Yeah, there's no magic pill. I
No.
mean, I used to have a part of a manager training program, uh, a small module on how to get people to do what you want them to do. Cause that's all they want to hear. How can I just get people? And I started off and there was just a picture of a pill and I'm like, this is what you guys want, right? I'm like, yeah, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Right. There's so many things that go into being a leader. And one of the biggest problems in our industry, our profession, the corporate world is that we've never established, and most organizations haven't specifically established, what does it mean to be a leader here? What are the competencies? What are the behaviors? What does it mean to be a leader at various levels? And what's the expectation and how are we going to hold you accountable to that? And quite honestly, is this something you even want to do? Because most people make the assumption, well, I have to be a leader when they should never be a leader in the first place. And we're just on this hamster wheel of having this huge leadership development industry because it's reactive to the fact that we're promoting high performing individual contributors that are not ready to be people leaders, and it's our
Mhm.
fault for doing it and we're not readying them.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It's um whether or not we're setting people up for failure, we're certainly not setting them up for success.
Absolutely. Being a high performing salesperson does not mean you're going to be a high performing VP of sales.
Right. It's a different set of skills and capabilities that are required, to actually oversee and support salespeople rather than just being, that dynamite salesperson.
We
Um,
keep perpetuating this because we're modeling the wrong behaviors, right? I've seen
Hmm.
leaders in retail buying offices throwing staplers at junior buyers, and that's part of the culture that's acceptable. So now what are we telling these junior people? Oh, forget our values and our behaviors and what we're supposedly holding you accountable to. The leaders in the organization act this way, and that's what gets rewarded. So we're fighting ourselves when we allow those behaviors to happen.
yeah, and I was having a talk with a friend, about a week and a half ago about, talking the talk versus walking the walk. And it just, to me, it is disappointing when I see that difference between the carefully written core values and missions and value statements that, companies put out there, and then what actually happens.
Night and day.
Yeah.
I've only experienced one company that got it right. And that I'm not going to say is Top Golf. It was Top Golf.
Okay.
Top Golf absolutely did that. I mean, my second day on the job running L&D, woman that worked for me took me to one of the venues and we were going to the management office. They call it the DO office, Director of Operations. And it
Right.
took us 15 minutes to get through one of the restaurants because she stopped to bus tables, to pick straw paper off the floor, to push chairs in. And then, what did I do? I'm not going to stand there like an idiot, right?
Yeah. You pitched in.
I'm going to do the same thing, right? So I'm doing the same. So afterwards I asked her, like, hey, we have a housekeeping staff and we had a meeting to get to. Why did you do that? And she looked at me and she was really confused. She's like, teamwork's one of our core values. Why wouldn't I? I'm not going to leave a mess for a teammate to pick up when I'm there. Well, I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in the men's room picking up paper off the floor at the corporate office. And I'm explaining this to the C-suite when we're in a meeting about, how do we ensure that the words on the wall are, woven through everything they do. And they all got it. And it's very rare that happens. And I mean, that stuck with me to this day.
That's amazing. And it is kind of sad to hear that you use the past tense with Top Golf, that somehow they lost their way.
Yeah, it's a I mean, it's a story for another time,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I mean, they got bought out and they're trying to get spun off again, and it's just a tough time for them, unfortunately.
Oh
It was a
boy.
great brand. Ken May did a phenomenal job there and used to brag to other CEOs that his competitive advantage was his people. I mean, he really meant it. He really felt it, and we all did everything we could to live up to that.
Wow. Um, and teamwork is one of those values that gets a lot of lip service. Um, and, and I can see people coming into an L&D officer's office. It's happened to me saying, we need trainings on teamwork. We need to, people to work better as a team. And as you put it so eloquently, what does that mean?
For me, it's not the best phrase, and I
Yeah.
used this years ago, and people made fun of me, but a fish stinks from the head down.
Okay.
A team is only as good as its leader.
Right.
So most times when we go in and do an intervention, we find out, if a team isn't working well together, a lot of the times, the majority of the times, it's because of the leadership behaviors. But one of the biggest things I found, and I do these all the time, these team building workshops. I love the table groups, Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And
Mm,
I say that because my first exposure was as part of a dysfunctional team, and I saw the power of that. And there were people on that team that truly did not like each other. And now, 20 years later, we're still friends. So I've seen the power of it, and I've run it, and I've run it with metrics. So I've taken underperforming management teams at a retail store, so lowest quartile in sales, and I've taken those and moved them up to the highest quartile in sales, where the only difference, the only variable has been this intervention. So we have the data to prove that this actually works. And I'm actually running a couple next month for a couple different organizations. But I think the key in that is redefining what accountability means.
mhm.
And, when we throw around the term team in corporate, I'll start off by asking people, how many of you are part of a team? And everyone will raise their hand. And I'm like, no, you're part of an org chart. You're not part of a team. And unless you're willing to grab a colleague and pull them aside and say, you're screwing up, you're not part of a team. Because I apologize. I have military and football analogies. That's it. That's my background. Right. So,
It's all good.
um, if a lineman misses a block and the quarterback is sacked, do you think they're waiting to get off the field for the coach to have words? Or do you think there's words happening in that huddle? Right? Teammates are
Mhm.
grabbing somebody by the face mask saying, if you ever miss a block again, this is not acceptable in nice
Right.
terms. Well, we don't do that in corporate America because we think we're only accountable to the team leader, not to each other. And if we're going
Right.
to be successful, we have to be accountable to each other. So that's one of the things when people come to me and say the team's not working, I look at the leader, I look at the team dynamics, the team operating principles, and we help redefine these things and make it self-sustainable. And we'll tie it to business metrics, and it absolutely works.
Yeah. And that level of accountability is absolutely necessary for these concepts that some people just, wave off as abstract. But like you said, when you're in a huddle and somebody's got you by the face mask saying, buddy, don't do that again.
Right. But
Yeah.
but it's everything that surrounds that as well, because we could do that on our team, but now consider performance management.
Hmm.
Traditionally, I'm reviewed for my individual contributions, not the team contributions. So now you're telling me to act as a teammate, but you're rewarding me as an individual. How do we reconcile that? So I think, that's where strategy comes into place, and a CHRO needs to be able to work with their talent leaders to really understand, look, if you're designing performance management to support these behaviors, then it needs to be tailored as such. We can't just rely on what we've always done or rely on what we think are best practices if it doesn't support the outcomes that we're looking for. So, I mean, performance management is a whole other podcast because that is completely broken as well.
Mm.
Because I call it the annual autopsy. We're measuring everything that we can't impact anymore, right? It's a lagging indicator. What's the
Yeah.
point? And it's a band-aid and a panacea for the fact that we don't hold managers accountable to coaching in the moment at the point of impact. So it's okay, we can't get managers to talk to their people. Instead of fixing that, we have a mid-year or an annual review, and we slap ourselves on the back and saying, oh, okay, we're doing performance management. No, you're not.
Hmm. Yeah. It's autopsy, as you put it, and that's to me is the mark of someone who's more of a technician. They can look backwards and say, "Oh, here's what we should have done." Managers and entrepreneurs have the knack of looking forward and understanding, okay, wow, we know what's happened. Here's what's going to happen next, unless we do an intervention or something that has the specific outcome in mind that we want.
And enough runway to allow the person to change their behavior and make a positive impact versus allowing it to continue. I mean, it's just from a business standpoint, it makes no sense to me. Why we allow managers not to have these conversations that are important like that. I mean, one of my favorite stories was I was a new manager and I used to have monthly updates, and it was
Mhm.
basically a mini review. And when we got to the final review for one of the guys and he got a needs improvement, he looked at me and he said, well, it's not like we haven't talked about this all year. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Right. That's the point. We always say no surprises. He made a specific decision not to change his behaviors. Didn't last long with the organization after that.
Right.
But that's my job as a people leader. I have to give that feedback, whether it's comfortable or not. And there's ways to take the emotion out of it. But
Mhm.
again, how much effort are organizations putting into, creating a learning culture or coaching culture? It's lip service in most cases if they don't
Yeah.
have the programs to back it up.
Yeah. This is not only tough work, but if you don't have the programs and the support to convert a culture from default, you know, passive aggressive performance management to actually moving the organization forward on a day to day or hourly basis, which is, it sounds tough, but you know, when you build up the habit and you build up the resilience in yourself and the team to actually pull it off, it it becomes second nature.
It becomes that's the way things are done here.
Yeah, e-
Absolutely. I mean,
exactly.
people culture. My understanding of culture, it's the rites, the rituals, and the stories that make up an organization.
Hmm.
And it's going to happen either intentionally or by omission, and you'd be better off to do it intentionally to have it match your corporate values and your overall mission statement. Otherwise it's just it's gonna be this, you know crabgrass or weeds that just grow through your organization. It might not be what you want it to be. So
Yeah,
I've seen intentional success with building, intentional cultures. You just have to be committed to doing it. And I think sometimes you just end up with executives who don't understand the connection, and it's fluff, or it's HR, or it's, they don't understand the metrics behind it. And again, I think it comes back to, us in L&D and talent management, but more importantly, the CHRO understanding, because they should be the trusted advisor of the CEO and have that credibility to make that impact and make those changes. And I've seen it happen, but those are few and far between.
yeah. And there's a big difference between asking yourself, "How did this happen to us?" and then, "How did we do this to ourselves?"
Yeah. And I think you can dig yourself out of that hole. I
Mhm.
mean, I think it's not, I'm not going to say it's not difficult, because it takes a lot of work, and intentionality, and probably some resources, including money, to really sit down and figure out what is the culture that we want to have. How do we want to act? Who do we want to be? I'm going to date myself here, but I go back to the WorldCom and Enron situations where,
Mhm.
their culture was win at all costs. So the employees were like, great, we're going to commit fraud so I can get my bonus because it's win at all costs. So, and it happened recently, probably 5 to 10 years ago, with Bank of America, where they were being incentivized for the number of new accounts they had. So when they open an account for someone, they would also open multiple accounts. And the customers didn't even know these accounts existed, because these salespeople were being rewarded for the number of accounts. And then they got
Mhm.
fined millions of dollars. So, you know, your culture needs to match the accountability. How are we ensuring? That's why in performance management we talk about not just what have you achieved, but how have you achieved it? Are you doing it in terms or in line with what we believe in as an organization? Are you acting with integrity? Do you have ethics? Or, whatever those things are, versus this win at all costs attitude, where then people are like, okay, well, if that's what it takes to be successful, then I'm going to follow that. And that happens, as we've seen in those cases.
Mhm. Yeah. You be careful what you ask for. That that's a big one.
And measure what matters, right? We say that all the
Mhm.
time. Are you measuring what matters? Because if you don't, then how can you get the data to back up what you're trying to attain?
Yeah. Um, so let's suppose we've got an opportunity to start from zero and do a reset on learning and development. Blow it all up and start all over again. W- What would be some of the first steps you'd take?
I've seen a lot of talk recently about where should L&D live, and I've seen it live under different areas. I've seen it under HR. I've seen it under ops. I've seen it under finance. Um, I've seen people advocating for it to be a standalone, and I don't know whether I'd go that far. I think if I don't know, if I could design it, I think I'd pull out all the non HR stuff out of L&OD talent management. Right? Back in 2009, 2010, the tail was wagging the dog. All the vendors were consolidating. So applicant tracking systems and compensation systems were now ATS, comp, learning, performance, succession, versus
Mhm.
siloed departments. But in the world, the departments were still siloed. So we're still catching up with that. And I think learning, performance, succession, learning and talent should be its own division, its own department. I think it works closely with HR, but I think we should own learning, performance, and succession. All of the ancillary things like recruiting, compensation, those are business partners that we could work with. There's data streams that we can include in that. So I think having our own is important. We're never going to get there until the business understands our value. And that is incumbent upon us as learning and talent leaders to educate people on what we mean to the business, and how we can accomplish that. And then there's all the other variables that go into it, right? I'm really I'm tired of listening to colleagues complain we don't have a seat at the table when they don't actually have business metrics to back up what they're doing.
Mhm.
I'm tired of people thinking training is a PowerPoint when we're hiring graphic designers as instructional designers.
Yeah.
Um, there's a loud voice on LinkedIn right now saying, well, educators would make the best learning leaders and best designers. My experience has been not that, because they don't understand the business implications and working inside a business. They understand the particulars of, adult learning or child learning. And I always try to stay away from the specific terms because I always mess those up. Androgyny and pedagogy.
Yeah.
whatever that is. I'm always bad with that. But um, out of hundreds of instructional designers that I've interviewed, maybe 5 were instructional designers at heart and truly understand what instructional
Hmm.
design is. And that's shot us in the foot, because now the business thinks, well, that PowerPoint looks nice. That's good training, right? So I think we need to do a lot more to professionalize, or have certifications around what we do and how we do it, and actually demonstrate understanding and proficiency and impact. I think that's the key. But the tie to, how does learning impact performance? How does learning impact succession? How do these things impact business metrics? Really should be the key to everything that we do. And learning and training teams should no longer just be held accountable to 100% completion of compliance courses in a regulated industry, right? It's
Hmm.
okay, great, you've completed the course, but are you proficient? Can you perform? Do we know you have the skill? I mean, I've always defined training as the transfer of knowledge into performance capability. Show me your programs and how they're doing that. I think most of the world would be hard pressed to be able to do that.
Good point. Good point. Um, any closing thoughts that you want to contribute for our viewers and listeners?
I just, the one other thing we didn't get into, we kind of brushed the side of it when we talk about leadership.
Hmm.
Um, Leadership identity starts early. It doesn't start when you're promoted. I think organizations can do a better job of helping people be leaders at all levels. And the example I use is, if you walk into Home Depot, that cashier that's checking you out, is not a manager, but they
No.
can absolutely be a leader. So you don't need to be a people leader to be a leader, and you can start developing that identity sooner. So
Oh
as
yeah.
you're looking at succession planning and you're tying it to culture, you're starting to really hold people accountable to the behaviors you're looking for when they take on that responsibility of being a people leader. And we need to better define that up front, so people understand it's not just more money, it's not just an office, it's not just a title. You cannot do what you've always done as an individual contributor as a leader. If you do, you will fail. And I think most people think, well, I got promoted for acting this way, so obviously that's what they value, and I'm going to keep doing it. If your behaviors don't change, if they don't escalate, and I'll give another quick example. When we talk about communication skills, we all need communication skills, from a cashier to a CEO, but the behaviors are extremely different. At the cashier end, I'm going to be extremely transactional. At the CEO, I'm going to be strategic and visionary, right? Getting people to come along on this journey versus just mandating things. And if we don't help people understand that they need to make these changes as they go up through the ranks, we're doing them in the business a disservice. So I think it's something that we need to start looking at a lot sooner rather than after people have been promoted.
Yeah, I've seen people who were fresh into a new job, and they may not have understood the job, but they were definitely leaders. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and willing to step up and do the things that leaders do.
But they probably had some good role models,
Hmm.
right? They understood what those behaviors were, versus people that I mentioned before in a buying office getting it, dodging staplers on a daily basis, probably
Yeah,
not modeling the right behaviors for them. So
right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Keith. Hopefully, we get a chance to do this again sometime.
this was great, Bill. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks for
Okay.
inviting me.
Thank you. And for all our viewers and listeners, we look forward to seeing you as we take another step on the perfect route.